Hello, my name is Kristina and I'm an educator performer at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. I'm working from home at the moment because we're practicing social distancing, but I really love science. So I started thinking, what could I do around my house to do scientific experiments? And then I remembered my kitchen. Wow, I have a whole laboratory in my kitchen. Did you know that cooking is a science? Every day we do science in our kitchens. We toast bread to make it go browner, or we make tea, we add milk. You know, there's so many experiments we can do in our kitchen, and I want to do one today. So as you can see, I have my protective gear on. So let's come over here and take a look about what we're going to see. So today we're going to be talking about bread. So humans have been eating bread for at least 8,000 years. There's evidence of bread being made in Egypt from about 8,000 years ago. But at that time, it was mostly what they call unleavened bread or unrisen bread, such as naan breads we might eat today. And about 4,000 years ago, there's evidence that humans were able to make bread rise. So how did they do that? Well, let's take a look at this. This is probably a loaf of bread you're familiar with from the supermarket, regular white sliced bread. But this wasn't really readily available in the supermarket till about the 1950s. And then yeast, which we would need to make bread rise, was probably available in supermarkets in about the 1940s. Bakers did obviously make bread for us, or we made bread at home, but we didn't have access to these commercially available things. So how do we make bread rise? Well, let me tell you a secret, and it kind of sounds a bit magical, but they got what they needed from the air. Yeast is a bacteria, typically a good bacteria, and it's all around us. So we can find a way to harness the yeast from the air. I know it sounds like magic. You know, a lot of science does. So this is what we're going to do to make our, what I'm going to call a sourdough starter. So I have some simple ingredients here. I have a whole wheat flour. I have a bread flour, or we could use an all-purpose flour. Then I have 3/4 of a cup of water. I have a glass bowl here, but you can use any sturdy mixing bowl, a spoon, and then I have a 1 cup measuring cup right here. And I also have time, which a lot of us have at the moment. This experiment, to really get what we need to get bread going, is going to take about 7 days in all. So it's going to need patience. So let's get started. So first of all, I'm going to take 1 cup of whole wheat flour. If you don't have any whole wheat flour on hand, if you just have bread flour or all-purpose flour, that's okay. You can use that. It might take a little bit longer. The only reason I'm using whole wheat flour is because to get this sourdough started, this just is a little quicker. So I'm going to add a cup of the whole wheat flour to my bowl there. And then I'm going to add my water. I'm just going to tip the water straight in, like so. And I'm going to mix it all up like so. Now just a note on that water, you want the water to be actually as unchlorinated as possible. Because chlorine kills both good and bad bacteria. So chlorine is added to water. So the best way to do that is either by using bottled water, or you can simply, like I did, get the water out of the tap and then leave it on the countertop for a little while until the chlorine evaporates. Okay, so it's simple as that. I've managed to mix all my flour into the water there. Now I'm going to simply cover it with a clean dish towel. Just loosely cover it. So now, in order for the bacteria to grow well, I really want to put this into a warm spot. And it's not too warm outside today, so I'm going to think of a place I can put it inside the house. And I think the best place is over here in the oven. The oven is not on, but I did put the lights on. And that's going to produce just enough of a warm environment for that bacteria to start to grow. And we'll jolly back here tomorrow and we'll talk about the next steps. Okay. Hello and welcome back. It's been 24 hours now since we first prepared our flour and water mixture. Let's take a look and see what happened. Okay, wow. I think I can already see some bubbles beginning to form there. But I also noticed that it's got a little bit dry in the oven. So that's probably something we're going to have to address in a moment when we start feeding the mixture. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're actually going to go ahead and take half of this ingredient out and put it into a separate bowl. There we go. So this is actually the discard bowl, but you don't have to discard this. I actually went ahead and texted a neighbour and told them what I was doing, and they were actually really interested in maybe starting their own sourdough starter. So in a few moments after I've finished with this part of the experiment, I'm going to go ahead and drop that on their doorstep. Obviously we're still practicing social distancing, so they can just go ahead and pick that up whenever they're ready. So let's take a look and see what we have here. I can see it's got, oh, it's almost like the texture of chewing gum, but we do need to go ahead and feed this part of the mixture. So just a quick note here. You know, yeast is actually like bacteria. It's a single cell organism, but unlike bacteria, it has a nucleus that stores all its genetic information. So it's actually closer to being a fungi, which is kind of interesting. But let's go ahead and feed the beast. So what do I mean by that? I mean, I'm going to give it some more flour and some more water. So today I'm going to be using bread flour. You can use all-purpose flour. And again, I'm going to be using water. I got this out of the tap. I got it out last night. And again, I've given it a chance for the chlorine to evaporate. So, you know, since I'm thinking that my yeast mixture looks a little bit dry, I'm actually only going to add half a cup of flour. But actually, on a daily basis, the standard ingredients is add 1 cup of flour and 3/4 cup of water. But I'm just going to go ahead and add half a cup of flour today. And that's something that you can actually address. If you think it's looking a bit dry, just add a little bit less flour. If you think it's looking a bit wet, you can add a little bit less water. Okay, let's add all that in. Okay, and give it a good stir. Okay, it's going to take a moment to stir it because we're combining it all together. Alrighty. That looks pretty good. Hello and welcome to day 4 of our experiment. So let's take a look at this. Ooh, can you see some bubbles definitely beginning to form? I hope your yeast looks a bit like this too, and I hope you've been feeding it every day, very important. So before we go ahead and feed this, let's talk about the fermentation process. So yeast is a very important ingredient in bread. It turns our dough into a flat thing, into a nice risen loaf. But how does this happen? Let's take a look at this diagram to help us understand. So you can see here that the yeast actually consumes sugar and converts it into carbon dioxide and alcohol. So this is actually the same fermentation process that happens when alcoholic beverages are produced, although there is no alcohol in bread. So I'm sure you're wondering, that's all well and good, but we didn't put any sugar into this ingredient, so where is that coming from? How come the yeast is expanding? And that's a good point. But what's really interesting to note that flour naturally has wild yeast and bacteria in it. And when you add water and mix it together, a natural enzyme called amylase actually converts the starches in the flour to sugars, glucose and maltose, and that's what our yeast is feeding on. Pretty cool. Hello and welcome to day 6. So I know I told you this was going to take about 7 days, but I felt like my starter was looking pretty good and bubbly, so I thought I would go ahead and start making the sponge for my bread. So in order to do that, we need to add a few ingredients. I've actually already measured out here 1 cup of my sourdough starter from the original batch, but here's some other ingredients that we are going to be needing to add in the next couple of days. So today, as I said, we're going to make what's called the sponge. So in order to do that, we are gonna add 1.5 cups of warm water and about 3 cups of flour. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that right now. 2, 3. Okay, and then my warm water. There we go. And I'm actually going to combine that and mix it up so it's completely combined. Okay, it's looking pretty good, but I'll go ahead and finish that in a minute. So now what's going to happen? Well, once that is completely combined, I'm going to go ahead and cover that again with a cloth, and I'm going to let that proof. Okay, it's been about 2 hours and my sponge is looking pretty good. So now it's time to add the additional ingredients we need to add in order to make this into a dough for bread. So before I do that, there's something very important you need to do, and that's you need to remove about a cup of this dough and put it into a different container. I just used my hands and roughly measured a cup. And this container goes into the refrigerator. And the reason for that is that actually slows the growth of the yeast down just enough. So you can probably use it about once a week and it won't get out of control. So I'll go ahead and pop this in my refrigerator and I know it's there for next time. Okay, so now it's time to add our additional ingredients. So I'm going to add 2 cups of flour, excuse me. Go ahead, 2 cups of flour and 2.5 teaspoons of salt. So you don't want to add the salt until this stage because the salt actually inhibits the growth of the yeast. But we know that the sponge has formed now, so it's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and get this all mixed together. Okay, so it looks like it's pretty well mixed together, but now I'm going to go ahead and turn that out onto a floured surface. So if you don't have one of these handy dandy things, you can just reach in and sprinkle it around. Works just as well. Okay, so I'm turning that out. Right, so let's go ahead. So I'm going to be kneading this for about 6 minutes. Okay, so I've been kneading the dough for about 6 minutes and you can see it looks quite different and yours will look different too. So why do we really need to knead the dough? Well, that's because it produces gluten and the gluten meshes hold the gases that the yeast produces to make the bread rise. So I think it's pretty much ready. I'm just going to shape it into a ball there and I'm going to put it back into the bowl. I actually cleaned the bowl. So I'm going to lightly oil the bowl. You can use something like this, a spray, or you can use regular oil and just brush it around. So after a couple of hours, I noticed my bread had risen enough. So I actually transferred it to this loaf pan and I let it rise for another few hours. And now I'm going to transfer this to the oven and I'm going to leave it in the oven for about 35 minutes at about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. This is fantastic. So we have a delicious loaf of bread now to share with our family. And don't forget, we saved some of the starter. So we can make more loaves of bread, which is awesome. And there's also thousands of other recipes out there that use a sourdough starter. So you can investigate those and make loads of more delicious treats for your family. So we don't have to rely so much anymore on this store-bought yeast. So don't forget, you can actually rewind this video and then you can watch it as much as you want to follow along. And also don't forget to post your videos to #DMNS Science Party so we can follow along with your science experiments. Have a great day.